Let me tell you exactly what my father said when I told him I wouldn't marry Devon Park. He set down his coffee cup, slowly, the way he did when he wanted you to understand that what was coming next was final. He looked at me across the dining room table of the house I'd grown up in, and he said, in a voice that didn't raise and didn't shake, and was somehow worse for both of those things, "Then you are no longer my daughter, no inheritance, no place in this family, nothing." I was 26 years old. I had just turned down a marriage proposal from the son of one of the wealthiest men in the state, and my father, the man who had raised me and paid for my education and told me every year of my childhood that family was everything, had just erased me in 32 words. I looked at him for a long time, and then I picked up my bag, and I walked out. 3 years later, I'm sitting in the house I own with the man I chose, in a life my father said I'd never have without his blessing. And last month, my father saw my husband's name in the news. He didn't call me, he didn't text. But my aunt told me what happened when he found out where Eli actually worked, what he'd actually built, what he was actually worth. She said my father froze, couldn't speak, sat down in his chair and stared at the screen for a full minute without moving. Good. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And tell me if you've ever had someone try to sell your future like it was theirs to sell, because that's exactly what this story is about. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Celeste Reeves. My father's name is Vincent. And from the time I was old enough to understand what dinner party conversation was, I understood one thing about my father. Status was his religion. He didn't worship God, or money, or success in the abstract. He worshipped position. The right schools, the right neighborhoods, the right last names at the right tables. He'd grown up without any of it, and he'd clawed his way into rooms that once would have been closed to him, and he'd never forgiven the world for making him claw in the first place. So he decided his children wouldn't have to. His children would be born into the rooms he'd earned. His children would never have to fight their way in because he would hand them the key. The problem with that plan is that the key he wanted to hand me came attached to a man I didn't choose. Devon Park, 29 years old. Son of Harold Park, who owned a development company in Clearbrook that had made the kind of money that gets you your own table at fundraisers and your name on buildings. Devon was educated, well-dressed, entirely pleasant in the way of someone who had never been told no about anything, and therefore had no need for rougher qualities. He wasn't cruel, wasn't arrogant in the loud way. He was just someone whose entire existence had been arranged for him, and who had therefore never had to develop an actual self. He was the human equivalent of a well-maintained lobby, impressive from the outside, empty when you got in. My father adored him, or more accurately, my father adored what Devon represented, a connection to Harold Park, a seat at a different level of the table. Grandchildren who would grow up with a name worth something, without having to earn it. He'd been working on this match for 2 years before he brought it to me officially. 2 years of dinners where Devon happened to be there. 2 years of my father mentioning Harold Park in conversation, like he was a natural part of every topic. 2 years of small coordinated moves before he finally sat me down and said, "Devon has asked about you," and I told him yes. You told him yes, on my behalf, without asking me. You didn't ask me, I said. You're 26. I know what's good for you. No, you know what's good for your standing. That's different. His face did the thing it did when someone said something accurate that he didn't want to acknowledge, went flat. Devon is a good man from an excellent family. Devon is nice. That's all I can say about him. Nice is enough when everything else is right. It's not enough for me. Celeste. No. I'm asking you to try. One serious attempt. Get to know him. Let the relationship develop. Give it a chance. And if I don't want to, then you'll need to think carefully about what you're choosing instead. I already knew what I was choosing instead. I just hadn't told my father yet, because the man I was choosing was someone my father would never have invited to one of his dinners. Someone who didn't have a famous last name, or a development company, or a seat at anyone's fundraiser table. Someone who drove a 4-year-old car and lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside, and worked at a technology company my father had never heard of. Someone who was, by every metric my father used to measure people, entirely unremarkable. Someone who was also the most interesting person I had ever met. His name was Eli Hartman. I met him at a coffee shop on a Wednesday morning in March. I was at the corner table with my laptop open, and he was at the counter explaining something to his phone, with the kind of focus that meant he didn't notice he was doing it out loud. He was describing a problem, something technical, architecture of something, systems that needed to talk to each other in ways they currently didn't. He had a voice that was clear and thoughtful, and completely unself-conscious. I watched him hang up the phone, realize he'd been muttering a monologue at a coffee shop counter, look around to see who'd heard, make eye contact with me, and say, "I was absolutely doing that out loud, wasn't I?" "The whole thing," I said. "Was I making sense?" "Not a word, but you sounded very certain about it." He laughed, sat down across from me without being invited, ordered 2 coffees without asking if I wanted one, set one in front of me, and started explaining what he'd been trying to figure out. We talked for 3 hours. He was a software engineer, not at a giant company with a famous name. At a startup he'd co-founded 3 years earlier, with 2 friends from college. They built infrastructure software, the kind of thing that other companies used to make their systems work. The kind of thing that nobody saw but everybody needed. I asked him if it was successful. He said they were getting there. He said it like someone who knew exactly what getting there meant and trusted the distance. He was 28 and calm and entirely unbothered by the size of the room he was in. I thought about Devon Park, about the well-maintained lobby, about 2 years of dinners I hadn't asked for, and I thought about 3 hours with a man who'd told a stranger about his infrastructure software problem like she was the only person who could possibly help him think it through. We went to dinner that Friday, and the Friday after, and most Fridays after that for 4 months before I told my father about him. I should have known how it would go. I did know, honestly. I just hoped I was wrong. I brought Eli to the house in Clearbrook one Sunday afternoon. He drove his 4-year-old car. He wore clean clothes that fit him well and weren't expensive. He shook my father's hand and looked him in the eye and said he'd heard a lot about him. My father smiled the smile he used when he was making assessments. My mother offered everyone something to drink. We sat in the living room and I watched my father run his internal calculation in real time. The car, the clothes, the company Eli named when my father asked where he worked. The way he said startup, with the particular pause of a man who was deciding whether the word was worth anything to the person he was saying it to. The visit lasted 45 minutes. My father was polite, my mother was warm. Eli was exactly himself, which was more than I could say for how I was doing. On the way home, Eli said, "He's not going to like this. No, he wants the other guy. Yes. What are you going to do?" "What I want to do." He reached over and took my hand, without looking away from the road. "Okay," he said. That was all. Okay. Like it was settled. Like the choice I was making didn't need any more drama than that. 2 weeks later, my father called me into the dining room and made his offer. Devon Park's question. His answer on my behalf. My chance to do the right thing. I said no. He said the thing about inheritance and family and nothing. I picked up my bag and walked out. If you've ever had a parent attach conditions to love and discovered the love wasn't worth the conditions, drop a like right now. My mother called me the next morning. She was whispering, the way she whispered when my father was in the house and she was saying something he hadn't approved. "He means it, Celeste. You know how he gets when he decides something. I know. He's going to cut you out of the will. I know. The house, the accounts, everything. Mom, I know. Are you sure? About this boy? He's 28, and yes, I'm sure." A long silence. "He seems kind." "He is. Your father won't change his mind easily. I know. But I want you to be happy." She paused. "I'll always answer when you call." "Thank you, Mom. Don't tell your father." I didn't tell my father. I moved forward instead. Eli and I kept building what we'd started. He kept building what he'd started 3 years earlier with his 2 college friends. Neither of us asked anyone's permission for either thing. We got an apartment together in Riverside. Small, practical, with a kitchen window that let in the right morning light and a second bedroom Eli used as a home office, where I'd find him at 11 p.m. most nights, deep in something I still didn't entirely understand. Infrastructure software. Systems. The invisible architecture that made everything else work. 6 months into living together, I understood something about Eli that I hadn't fully understood in the coffee shop or the dinners or the Sunday visit to my parents' house. He wasn't unremarkable. He was so focused on what he was building that he had stopped caring about looking remarkable to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. There's a difference. Unremarkable people have nothing underneath the surface. Eli had more underneath than I could see all at once. I kept finding new rooms. That's the best way I can describe it. Every month, another room I hadn't known was there. He proposed on a Tuesday night. We were eating takeout on the couch with a documentary playing in the background about the history of bridges. He muted it in the middle of a segment about suspension engineering, turned to me and said, "I have something to ask you, and I want to do it now before I think about it too much and overcomplicate it. Will you marry me?" He pulled a ring from his hoodie pocket. Simple. A diamond that was the right size for what it was. Not enormous, not showy, right? Yes, I said. Obviously yes. He put it on my finger, unmuted the bridge documentary. We finished our takeout. That was the proposal. It was completely, exactly him. I wouldn't have changed a single part of it. I called my mother. She cried in the quiet way she cried when she didn't want to be heard, being emotional. "I'm happy for you. Are you going to tell Dad?" "I'll tell him." "How do you think he'll take it?" "The same way he takes everything he hasn't arranged." She paused. "I think he's wrong about this. I want you to know I think he's wrong." "I know, Mom. He loves you. Even when he's wrong, he loves you." "I know that too." My father did not call to congratulate me. He sent a one-line email. "You've made your choice. I hope it's worth what you've given up." I showed it to Eli. He read it once. Handed my phone back. "He thinks you gave something up. He thinks I gave up a lot. What do you think?" "I think I got something better than what he was offering." Eli smiled, the small, certain smile he had. "Yeah," he said, "me too." We got married on a Saturday afternoon in late spring. A small ceremony at a venue in Millbrook, 50 people, the people who actually knew us and had shown up for us in real time and not just when it was convenient. My mother came. She sat in the third row and cried through the whole ceremony and didn't care who saw. My father did not come. Devon Park was not mentioned. The billionaire's son and his father and the table at the fundraiser didn't exist in that room. Just us and the people who chose to be there. At the reception, someone asked Eli for a speech. He stood up, didn't have notes, looked at me for a second before he spoke. Celeste's father told her she was giving something up when she chose me, and I want to say something about that. The room got quiet, the particular quiet of people recognizing that something real is about to be said. He's right that she gave something up. She gave up a version of her future that was already planned for her. She gave up the life someone else decided she should want. She gave up the comfort of doing what she was told and calling it love. He paused. And what I want her to know, and what I want everyone here to know, is that I understand what that cost. I know it wasn't nothing. I know walking out of that dining room was one of the hardest things she's done. And I want to stand here in front of everyone who loves her and say, we don't need it. We have never needed it. What we have is more than enough. And what we're building is more than they could see. He sat down. My mother was no longer trying to be quiet about the crying. I held his hand under the table and thought about Tuesday nights with bridge documentaries and right-sized diamond rings and the man who had more rooms than I could see all at once. We don't need it. He meant every word. Stay with me here, because this is where the story turns. 6 months after the wedding, 6 months of the life we were building, our apartment in Riverside, his late nights in the home office, my work, our weekends, the slow accumulation of a real life with a real person. And then, on a Thursday morning in November, Eli came out of the home office at 7 a.m., earlier than usual. His face was doing something I'd only seen a few times. Not quite disbelief, more like the moment right after disbelief, when the thing that felt impossible is becoming real, and your face hasn't caught up yet. What? I said. It went through, he said. What went through? The acquisition. What acquisition? He sat down at the kitchen table. He put his hands flat on the surface like he needed to feel something solid. Harrison Tech, they bought us. They bought your company? Yes. For how much? He told me the number. I will not pretend I responded calmly. I did not respond calmly. I asked him to say it again. He said it again. $850 million. Harrison Tech had acquired the company Eli and his 2 college friends had built in the 3 years before I met him and the 3 years since. The infrastructure software that nobody saw but everybody needed had turned out to be needed enough that one of the largest technology companies in the country had paid $850 million for it. Eli's founding stake was 23%. His share of the acquisition was approximately $195 million. I sat down next to him at the kitchen table. We looked at each other. "You built that," I said. "We built that, me, and James, and Corey. For 6 years, while you were driving a 4-year-old car. The car is fine. While we were in an apartment in Riverside. The apartment is fine too. Eli, Celeste. Did you know this was coming? I knew we were in acquisition talks. I didn't know it was going to close at this number. Nobody knew it was going to close at this number. $195 million. Approximately. After taxes, it's more like, Eli. Yeah. We're going to need a minute. Take as long as you need. No. I mean both of us. We need a minute." He looked at the table, then at me, then he laughed. Not the small, certain smile. A real laugh. The laugh of a 29-year-old man who had built something for 6 years in apartments and late nights and home offices, and had just found out it had been worth more than anyone around him had understood. "Yeah," he said. "We might need a minute." The news broke publicly the next morning. Business section. Technology news sites. Harrison Tech's acquisition of Hartman Infrastructure at $850 million. One of the largest acquisitions in the sector that year. Eli's name in the headline. Co-founder. Lead architect. The man who'd built the invisible structure that made everything else work. In a coffee shop in Clearbrook on a Wednesday morning in March 6 years ago, talking to his phone about systems that needed to talk to each other. I didn't call my father. I didn't send an email. I didn't do anything except live my life in the apartment in Riverside with my husband, who was now worth approximately $195 million, and who came home from meetings with lawyers and accountants, looking slightly dazed and wanting takeout, and the Bridge documentary, and the dog-eared book on his nightstand. My aunt called me, my mother's sister, the one who went to both houses for holidays and had watched the whole story from a seat nobody else had occupied. Celeste. "Hey, Aunt Pam. Your father saw the news." "Okay." He recognized the name. Hartman. He put it together. "Okay." Celeste. He sat down in his chair and couldn't speak for a full minute. "I was there. I watched it happen." "Okay." He looked at your mother. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her. "What did Mom do?" I could hear the smile in my aunt's voice. She poured herself a cup of tea and said, Celeste always did know what she was doing. If you've ever wanted to be in a room for a moment you weren't allowed to witness, tell me in the comments, because I would have given a great deal to see my father's face in that chair. To see the man who had written me a one-line email about what I'd given up sitting in his living room learning that what I'd given up and what I'd chosen were not the calculation he'd run. He didn't call me, that week, or the week after, not directly. What he did was send my mother as an intermediary, which was something he'd done my entire life when he wanted something he wasn't willing to ask for himself. My mother called me on a Sunday afternoon. The voice she used told me everything before she said a word. "Your father would like to see you, would he? He knows he handled things badly. Does he? Celeste, he's your father. He's the man who said I had no place in this family. Those were his exact words. I know. He meant them at the time. He knows that too. So what changed?" She paused. "You know what changed. Say it. He saw what Eli built. And now I'm worth talking to again." "That's not, Mom, say what it is." A long silence. "He was wrong about Eli. He knows that. And he's too proud to call you himself. And he wants to see you. That's the whole truth of it." I thought about that for a long time. About pride and wrong, and the difference between a man realizing he was wrong and a man being confronted with evidence that made being wrong unavoidable. There is a distinction. One is growth. One is mathematics. My father was doing mathematics. He'd seen a number and recalculated and decided the answer was different from what he'd believed. He hadn't examined why he'd believed it. He hadn't looked at the method. He'd just updated the output. That wasn't the same as understanding anything. I told Eli that night. He listened the way he always listened, with his full attention, no interruptions, no rush to have a reaction, just holding the information until he'd thought about it. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know. What would feel right? Not what he's asking for. He's not asking to apologize. He's asking to reconnect now that reconnecting is useful to him. Yeah, he didn't come to our wedding. No, he said I had no place in this family. He did. And now he wants to see me, because he saw your name in the news. Yes. What would you do? Eli thought about it. Genuinely thought. I think I'd make him wait, he said finally. Not forever, but long enough that the reconnection happens on your terms. Long enough that when you see him, you're not walking back into the same dynamic. Long enough that he understands the version of you he's getting now is not the same version he dismissed. I made him wait, not to be cruel, not for revenge, for the reason Eli said. I needed to show up on my terms. I needed the meeting to happen from a position of clarity instead of a position of being summoned. I wrote my father a letter instead of calling. Took me 4 drafts. The final version said, I will meet you. But I need you to understand something first. When you disowned me, you made a choice. And Eli and I made our choice. And everything that has come since is the result of our choices, not yours. I don't need your approval now any more than I needed it then. I'm not coming back to seek it. If you want to see me, it needs to be because you understand that I married the right person for the right reasons, and those reasons had nothing to do with what was in his bank account. If you can meet me there, call me. If you can't, we don't need to meet at all. He called 2 weeks later. He said he wanted to talk. I said I had heard what he'd asked, and I needed to know if he'd read what I'd written. He said he had. I said, did he understand it? He said he was trying. I said that was the most honest thing he'd said to me in 3 years, and I would take it. We met at a restaurant in Millbrook, neutral ground, not the house in Clearbrook with all its history, not our apartment in Riverside, a restaurant in the middle, where no one had the advantage of home. He was older than I remembered. That's what I noticed first, not dramatically, but the way a year becomes visible on a person's face when you haven't seen them regularly. He stood when I came in. We didn't hug. We sat down. He looked at the table for a moment before he looked at me. You look well, he said. I am well. The apartment in Riverside. Yes. Is that where you'll stay? For now. We've been looking at houses. In Clearbrook? Maybe. We haven't decided. He nodded. He ordered coffee. I ordered tea. We sat with the distance between us and the weight of 3 years on the table, alongside the coffee and the tea. I read your letter, he said. I know. Several times. Okay. I understand what you were saying. Do you? I think I do. Then say it back to me. He looked up at that, not offended, more like he recognized the move as fair. You're saying that Eli was worth choosing before the acquisition, that the acquisition doesn't change what was right about the choice. Yes. And that I should have seen that. Yes. I didn't. No. I was looking at the wrong thing. He paused. I spent a lot of my life looking at the wrong things, measuring people by things that could change, that have changed, that have nothing to do with who they actually are. He turned his coffee cup on its saucer. A small movement, something to do with his hands. Your mother has told me that approximately 400 times in various ways over our marriage. I apparently needed to see it for myself. That's a very expensive lesson. Yes, something moved in his face. Not quite a smile. Something smaller, more honest. Your husband, he built something real. He did. While I was telling you he wasn't enough. Yes, I was wrong. Yes. I'm sorry, Celeste. If you've ever waited for those 2 words from someone and felt the complicated truth of finally getting them, you know exactly what I felt in that moment. Not relief. Not triumph. Not the closure that movies promise. Something more complicated. The feeling of a door that has been closed for 3 years, opening slightly. The feeling of a person who is your father, who made choices that cost both of you years, standing at the other side of that door and saying I was wrong, and meaning it. Or trying to mean it. Or working toward meaning it. Which is maybe the most honest version of apology. I'm working toward the meaning. Thank you, I said. That's all I needed to hear. Can we? He stopped. Started again. I'd like to know him, your husband, if he's willing. You'll need to ask him. Would you put in a word? No, he blinked. No, you want to know Eli, you call him. You don't go through me. You don't manage the meeting. You don't position yourself. You call him, and you introduce yourself as my father, and you ask if he'd be willing to have a conversation. If he says yes, you start from there. He might say no. He might. Would you be okay with that? It would be his choice to make. My father nodded slowly, the nod of a man processing a way of doing things that he didn't invent and had not previously considered. "You've learned something," he said. It wasn't a criticism, more like recognition. "What's that?" "How to hold your ground without yelling. I had a good teacher." "Eli?" "No." I looked at him. You taught me what it costs not to." Eli agreed to meet him. Not because the acquisition changed anything. Not because my father's interest was suddenly valuable. But because I am Eli's wife, and my father is my father, and Eli has never once in our relationship made a decision based on who the other person deserved. He met my father for coffee in Millbrook on a Thursday morning. Eli drove his current car, which is a couple of years newer than the old one, but still not remarkable. My father had looked up everything about the acquisition beforehand, had read the business coverage, had done his research the way he did his research on everything. He told me afterward that he'd come prepared to be impressed, and that Eli had spent the entire coffee talking about what they were building next. Not what they'd built, what was coming, what the problem was, what the solution might look like, how the systems needed to talk to each other in ways they currently didn't. My father said Eli talked for 45 minutes about the next thing, like the last thing was already behind him. Like $195 million was context, not destination. He didn't mention the money once, my father told me. "No," I said. "He doesn't think about it that way." "What does he think about?" "The problem in front of him. Always the problem in front of him." My father was quiet for a moment. "Devon Park would have talked about the money," he said. "Devon Park would have talked about nothing else." "Yes, I chose wrong." "You chose the metric you understood. The metric just turned out to be the wrong one. Will you give me a chance to use a better one?" I looked at my father, 60 years old. The man who had clawed his way into rooms and decided his children wouldn't have to, and made choices from that decision that cost him 3 years with his daughter. Who was trying? Who had said I was wrong and was working toward meaning it? "Yes," I said. "But we go at my pace. And Eli's." "Understood. And you don't talk to Devon Park's father about this." "Vincent." "Dad. I won't." "Good. We are not fixed. I want to be honest about that. There are still dinners that have awkward edges. Still moments when my father falls back into old calculations and catches himself and corrects. Still a distance between what we were and what we're becoming that hasn't fully closed. But it's closing, slowly, on our terms, the way good things get built. Not fast, not flashily, with intention, with good bones, with a foundation worth trusting. Eli and I bought a house. Not in Clearbrook, not to make a point. Just because we found one we loved in a town called Newberry Cove, 30 minutes north, on a lot with old trees and room for a garden and a second building we're turning into the proper version of a home office. It has the right morning light. Eli found it. He walked through it once and said, "This is it," and I trusted him. He is good at seeing what things will become. That has always been true, long before anyone else could see it. Someone watching this right now is being told they're making a mistake. Someone's father is telling them who to choose. Someone is sitting in a dining room being offered an inheritance in exchange for a life they didn't pick. If that's you, I want you to hear something clearly. The people who love you conditionally, who offer you belonging with strings attached, and call the strings protection, do not understand what they're asking you to give up. They cannot see what you can see about your own life, and the future they're trying to hand you is theirs, not yours. My father offered me the Park family and a seat at a table, and an inheritance, and a life that was already arranged. I turned it down for a man in a 4-year-old car who was solving infrastructure problems in a 2-bedroom apartment. I turned it down for Tuesday nights and bridge documentaries and a right-sized diamond ring from a hoodie pocket. I turned it down, and my father froze when he saw what that choice had become. But here's what I need you to understand. It would have been the right choice even if Eli's company had never been acquired. Even if the number had never appeared in a news headline. Even if my father had never needed to recalculate. It was right the day I made it. The acquisition didn't make it right. It just made the rightness visible to people who needed the number to see it. I could see it in a coffee shop on a Wednesday in March, when a man talked to his phone out loud and ordered me a coffee without asking, and started explaining his problem like I was the person who could help him think it through. That's when I knew, long before anyone else did, and I trusted what I knew. Don't give up what you know for what someone else needs you to believe. Build the thing you can see. Choose the person you choose. Let the work speak. The results will come. And when they do, the people who told you to choose differently will have to find a chair to sit down in. They always do. Tell me in the comments. Tell me about the choice you made that nobody around you understood. Tell me what it became. I read every single one.